I stood in my daughter's kitchen, watching 7-year-old Tommy blow out his birthday candles, when Sarah dropped the bombshell that would shatter our family forever. The chocolate cake sat between us like a barrier, its flickering flames casting shadows across her determined face, while children's laughter echoed through the house. Little did I know that within minutes, she'd turn my grandson's innocent celebration into the opening shot of a legal war. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice cutting through the party noise with surgical precision. I'd raised this woman for 32 years, sacrificed everything after her father died, worked double shifts at Morrison's grocery to put her through college and law school. Now she stood there with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, like a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The other parents were gathering their coats, completely unaware that my world was about to implode. Tommy ran past me clutching his new superhero action figure, chocolate frosting smeared across his innocent cheek. If you're dealing with family drama like this, tell me your state in the comments below. What Sarah said next would change everything. Sarah waited until the last guest left before cornering me by the kitchen sink where I was washing dishes, my hands trembling as I scrubbed frosting from plastic plates. Her designer heels clicked against the tile with military precision as she paced behind me like a prosecutor preparing her case. Tommy inherited $3,742,000 from Great-Aunt Millicent, she announced, her voice hollow and rehearsed. I nearly dropped the plate I was holding, warm, soapy water cascading down my wrists as the magnitude hit me. Millicent, my late husband's eccentric sister who disappeared to Europe decades ago after a bitter divorce. The lawyers found me through public records, Sarah continued, pulling out a thick manila envelope that rustled ominously in the sudden quiet. Inside were documents detailing everything: a villa in Tuscany, blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, offshore accounts scattered across 3 countries. Tommy was upstairs playing with his birthday toys, completely oblivious to the fortune that had just landed in his 7-year-old lap. But Sarah's next words proved this wasn't about securing Tommy's future. It was about controlling it. "I've petitioned the family court for full custody and complete control of the inheritance," Sarah announced with chilling matter-of-factness, sliding official documents across the granite countertop. The papers were stamped and dated from 3 days ago, meaning she'd planned this ambush while I was buying Tommy's birthday presents. "My husband makes over $200,000 annually, we own our home, and I have an MBA from Suffolk," she recited like a resume. Each qualification felt like another nail in my coffin. I'd worked as a cashier for 15 years, living paycheck to paycheck in my tiny apartment, saving every spare dollar for Tommy's college fund that now seemed pathetically inadequate. "You can visit twice monthly, supervised visits with a court-appointed social worker," she continued, her tone suggesting generosity. The word supervised stung like acid. I thought about our sacred Sunday pancake traditions, afternoon walks feeding ducks at Miller's Pond, bedtime stories that stretched into the night. Now I'd need appointments to hug my own grandson. What Sarah didn't know was that I wouldn't go down without a fight. I walked upstairs to Tommy's bedroom, my heart breaking with each step as I watched him play contentedly with his new toys, innocent of the battle raging downstairs. His superhero figures stood on the windowsill, ready to save the world from imaginary villains, while real ones plotted his future. "Grandma, look at this," he called out, holding up a remote-controlled car that flashed rainbow lights. His gap-toothed smile radiated such pure joy that I nearly collapsed right there on his dinosaur carpet, overwhelmed by Sarah's betrayal. I'd been the one comforting him through nightmares, teaching him to tie his shoes, explaining why Daddy didn't visit anymore. Now Sarah wanted to erase my presence as efficiently as she'd filed those court documents. "Can you come over tomorrow for pancakes like always?" he asked, climbing into my lap with unconscious trust. I couldn't shatter his innocent world by explaining that tomorrow might be our last day together. Instead, I held him close and made a silent promise. The war had begun, but I had weapons Sarah didn't know about. The next morning dawned gray and threatening as I drove to Patricia Henderson's law office, a family attorney specializing in grandparents' rights. Her waiting room smelled of coffee and desperation, filled with hollow-eyed people clutching folders like lifelines. Faded magazines covered a scratched table, their cheerful covers mocking the tragedies that brought clients here. When Patricia finally called my name, I followed her into an office lined with law books and certificates speaking of decades fighting impossible battles. "Tell me everything," she said warmly, gesturing toward a cracked leather chair that had probably witnessed countless similar betrayals. I laid out Sarah's calculated ambush from start to finish, watching Patricia's eyebrows rise with each shocking detail. She took notes methodically, her pen scratching across paper with rhythmic intensity. When I finished, she leaned back thoughtfully and delivered news that felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Massachusetts had laws that could protect me, if I was willing to fight dirty. Massachusetts courts prioritize the child's best interests above all financial considerations, Patricia explained, pulling out a thick folder labeled Grandparents' Rights Precedents. She outlined a strategy to expose Sarah's mercenary motivations while protecting my relationship with Tommy, warning this battle would require every ounce of strength I possessed. "We'll need character witnesses, documentation, photographic evidence proving that separating you would cause emotional harm." I immediately thought of Mrs. Rodriguez, Tommy's teacher, who'd mentioned how his face lit up discussing our weekend adventures. The pediatrician had records of my presence at every appointment. Even my grocery store manager could testify about my character. Sarah had underestimated the extensive paper trail of genuine love connecting Tommy and me through years of shared experiences. Patricia's retainer would drain my savings, but some battles transcend money. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Monday, giving us precious little time to build a case that could shock Sarah into submission. I spent 3 intensive days gathering evidence: photographs, school records, medical documentation, testimonials painting an undeniable picture of devoted grandmotherly love. Mrs. Rodriguez wrote an eloquent letter describing how Tommy consistently glowed, mentioning our adventures, how he'd drawn countless pictures of us feeding ducks and building sandcastles. The pediatric office provided records showing my presence at every major appointment, establishing an unshakable pattern of caregiving that contradicted Sarah's claims. Jim Morrison, my grocery store manager, wrote a powerful reference mentioning how I'd switched shifts countless times for Tommy's school events without complaining. Each document felt like a small victory, proof that authentic love couldn't be dismissed through legal technicalities. Patricia warned that custody battles were marathons requiring strategic patience and emotional endurance. But I had something Sarah didn't: 15 years of grocery store grit and a grandmother's fierce determination. What happened next would determine if love could triumph over money. The courthouse steps felt like walking toward my execution as Patricia and I approached the imposing building that would determine Tommy's future. Sarah was already there with her expensive attorney, an intimidating man in a tailored suit who probably charged more per hour than I made in a month. They stood like a coordinated team, reviewing strategy while I clutched my worn purse and tried to calm my racing heart. The marble floors echoed with broken families seeking justice, each case a reminder that courts often treat children like property. Judge Margaret Foster called our case at 9:30 sharp, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd presided over thousands of family disputes. Sarah's attorney spoke first with polished confidence, painting me as unfit for lacking financial resources and sophisticated judgment. His arguments were crafted to make my genuine love seem inadequate compared to their spreadsheets and credentials. But Patricia had prepared me for this assault, and our counterattack was ready. The secret weapon in her briefcase would change everything. "Your Honor," Patricia began with steady confidence, "this isn't about money management, but about preserving the most important relationship in this child's life." She presented photograph after photograph of Tommy and me together. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, first day of school, beach trips where I'd saved every penny for memories. Each image told a story of consistent presence and unconditional love no trust fund could replace. "Mrs. Davidson has been this child's emotional anchor since his father abandoned the family 2 years ago," Patricia continued, her words hitting their target with devastating accuracy. The judge examined our evidence while Patricia documented Sarah's frequent business trips, her husband's demanding schedule, and the nannies who provided more daily care than she did. The inheritance had revealed Sarah's true priorities, but this courtroom was exposing them to judicial scrutiny. Our secret weapon remained hidden, waiting for the perfect moment. What came next would leave the entire courtroom speechless. Judge Foster studied our documents with careful attention. Understanding her decision would ripple through Tommy's entire future. She asked Sarah pointed questions about our relationship, why supervised visits were necessary, what harm I supposedly posed. Sarah's rehearsed answers grew defensive under judicial pressure, her confidence cracking as argument weaknesses became apparent. "Has Mrs. Davidson ever endangered your son?" Foster asked directly, pen poised over the record. "Well, no," Sarah admitted reluctantly, "but she doesn't understand complex financial matters." The judge's skeptical expression suggested financial literacy wasn't grounds for destroying family relationships, especially when professional managers existed for inheritance complexities. Patricia seized this opening to introduce testimony from Tommy's teacher, pediatrician, and even the librarian who'd observed our relationship for years. Each witness painted the same picture: a devoted grandmother whose presence was essential to Tommy's emotional development. The tide was turning in our favor, but Sarah's attorney had one final devastating card to play. "Your Honor, Mrs. Davidson's financial instability makes her unsuitable for any guardianship role," Sarah's lawyer announced theatrically, producing bank statements detailing my modest income with cruel precision. He'd obtained records of my wages, apartment rent, even credit card debt accumulated buying Tommy's presents when paychecks fell short. Each number was strategically presented to suggest poverty disqualified me from loving effectively. That financial struggle equaled moral failure. The courtroom felt claustrophobic as my struggles were displayed like criminal evidence. Years of sacrifice reduced to cold spreadsheet entries, ignoring the love behind every purchase. Sarah sat smugly, probably thinking this revelation would seal her victory. But Patricia had anticipated this predictable attack, and our response would transform my supposed poverty into undeniable strength. What happened next would expose the fundamental difference between buying affection and earning it through sacrifice. "Your Honor," Patricia declared with supreme confidence, "these records actually prove Mrs. Davidson's extraordinary dedication to her grandson's well-being." She pulled out a comprehensive folder containing 3 years of my bank statements, highlighting every purchase I'd made for Tommy, despite limited income. "Notice how she spent $47 on school supplies in September, $63 on his winter coat, nearly $200 on birthday presents this year," Patricia explained with growing intensity. The judge studied this evidence with fascination, recognizing the pattern of selfless sacrifice defining my relationship with Tommy since birth. Mrs. Davidson has consistently prioritized her grandson's needs above her own comfort, often going without necessities to ensure he had everything required for success and happiness. Sarah's face drained of color as the courtroom recognized the difference between buying temporary affection with inherited millions and earning permanent love through years of devoted sacrifice. My poverty became proof of unshakable character, while Sarah's wealth revealed shallow priorities. But our secret weapon was still coming. Patricia reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document that made Sarah gasp audibly, her face draining of remaining color as she recognized the devastating implications. "Your Honor, Mrs. Davidson has maintained a college savings account for Tommy, contributing $25 every month for 3 years despite earning minimum wage," she announced with triumphant satisfaction. She handed the judge official records showing my automatic deposits to Tommy's education fund, a modest but consistent investment in his future that began long before anyone knew about the inheritance. While the petitioner seeks control of millions through court manipulation, Mrs. Davidson has been quietly building her grandson's future one paycheck at a time with no expectation of recognition. The numbers were small compared to the massive fortune, but they represented something infinitely more valuable: a grandmother's unwavering commitment regardless of personal cost. Sarah's attorney shuffled frantically through papers, searching for some counter to this emotional bombshell that had transformed the entire case dynamic. The judge set down her pen and looked directly at Sarah with an expression suggesting the decision was becoming clear. Tommy's future would be determined not by bank balances, but by the authentic quality of love each guardian could provide. Judge Foster called a brief recess, leaving both teams to contemplate the evidence while she reviewed case details in her chambers. I sat in the hallway watching Sarah pace with obvious agitation, her confidence shattered by the revelation of my secret college fund exposing her true motivations. Patricia squeezed my hand reassuringly while cautioning that custody battles could still take unexpected turns, even when victory seemed certain. "Judges sometimes surprise everyone," she whispered. "But you've given Foster compelling reasons to preserve your relationship with Tommy permanently." Through the courthouse windows, I could see children playing in the park across the street, their laughter a reminder of what this battle was truly about beyond money and legal technicalities. Sarah approached me during the recess, her confident demeanor replaced by something resembling genuine shame for the first time. What she said next would reveal whether greed had completely consumed the daughter I'd raised with love and hope. This conversation would determine if our fractured family could ever heal from this devastating betrayal. "Mom, maybe we can work something out?" Sarah said hesitantly, her voice lacking the conviction she'd displayed during the kitchen ambush. Her expensive shoes clicked nervously against polished tiles as she struggled to find words that might salvage her crumbling case. "I never meant for things to go this far," she continued with obvious discomfort, though we both knew she'd calculated every move with deliberate precision from the beginning. The inheritance had transformed my beloved daughter into someone I barely recognized, someone willing to weaponize the legal system against her own mother without apparent conscience. "Tommy asks about you every day," she finally admitted, the first honest thing she'd said since this nightmare began. Her admission revealed the emotional damage her scheme was inflicting on the innocent child caught in our battle's crossfire. Patricia had advised listening carefully but avoiding agreements without legal review, knowing desperate people make promises they can't keep. Sarah's olive branch felt more like manipulation than genuine remorse. Her next words would test whether maternal love could overcome the destructive greed consuming her soul. "I'll drop the supervised visitation requirement," Sarah offered desperately, her voice trembling as she watched her strategy collapse like a house of cards. She'd spent thousands on legal fees, alienated her mother, and traumatized her son, only to discover that genuine love couldn't be legislated away through court proceedings. "You can see Tommy whenever you want, just like before," she continued frantically, negotiating from obvious weakness. But her concession felt hollow after weeks of threats and intimidation designed to erase me from Tommy's life entirely. The damage to our relationship might prove irreparable, trust shattered by her willingness to use my grandson as a weapon in pursuit of financial control. Patricia had warned that Sarah might attempt last-minute negotiations once she realized Foster was leaning toward preserving my rights. "What about the inheritance?" I asked pointedly, knowing financial control remained her primary objective despite this apparent change of heart. Her answer would reveal whether she'd learned anything from this humiliating courthouse experience. Judge Foster's voice echoed through the hallway, calling us back for her final decision. The next few minutes would determine whether justice would prevail over greed. Judge Foster resumed her position with deliberate movements, preparing to deliver a decision that would create lasting consequences for everyone involved. Her experienced eyes swept across the tense courtroom, taking in Sarah's expensive legal team, my humble representation, and the family photographs scattered across the evidence table like puzzle pieces of a relationship greed had nearly shattered. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence," she began, her voice carrying the full weight of judicial authority, "this court finds that the petitioner's case lacks sufficient merit to justify the requested restrictions." Sarah's face crumpled as these words hit like devastating blows, her calculated confidence evaporating in the harsh light of legal defeat. "Mrs. Davidson's relationship with her grandson clearly serves his best interests and shall continue without court-imposed restrictions," Foster continued firmly, her words feeling like a precious lifeline thrown to someone drowning in despair. Patricia squeezed my hand as victory became reality, though I understood this battle had inflicted damage that might never fully heal. The inheritance meant to secure Tommy's future had instead torn his family apart in ways money could never repair. "However," Judge Foster continued with a tone suggesting victory, came with important conditions. "This court is concerned about proper inheritance management moving forward." She'd researched the complex will thoroughly, understanding that millions required professional oversight regardless of family dynamics. The court appoints First National Trust Company as co-trustee alongside Mrs. Mitchell, ensuring financial decisions serve the child's interests rather than adult agendas. Sarah's attorney leaned forward, recognizing shared control was better than losing everything. The arrangement would prevent Sarah from weaponizing Tommy's money while ensuring professional management of his substantial assets. Mrs. Davidson shall maintain her current relationship with her grandson, including overnight visits, school involvement, and full grandparental rights without supervision, Foster concluded with unmistakable authority. The gavel's sharp bang echoed through the courtroom like thunder, officially ending Sarah's attempted coup and restoring our family's natural order. But walking out into afternoon sunlight, I knew real healing would require much more than legal victories. The hardest work was just beginning. The weeks following our courthouse victory passed in a strange mixture of relief and persistent tension as Sarah and I attempted rebuilding a relationship fractured by betrayal and legal warfare. Tommy seemed happier during resumed weekend visits, though I noticed he'd grown more cautious around his mother, somehow sensing dangerous undercurrents he couldn't fully understand. Our cherished Sunday pancake tradition resumed carefully, but the easy intimacy we'd shared felt fragile, contaminated by knowledge of how quickly family bonds could be weaponized by those we trusted most. Sarah made awkward attempts at reconciliation, bringing expensive coffee when dropping Tommy off, asking about my work with uncomfortable politeness that felt more obligatory than genuine. The inheritance remained in professional trust management, generating monthly statements that served as constant reminders of the fortune that had nearly destroyed our family's foundation. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned that Tommy's behavior had improved significantly since what she diplomatically called the difficult period, though she was too polite to ask about details. Some wounds cut deeper than money could heal, and forgiveness remained challenging work requiring daily commitment from everyone involved. The real test would come when Sarah faced her own conscience. 3 months after the court decision restored our family balance, Sarah arrived unexpectedly at my modest apartment on a rainy Thursday evening with an expression I hadn't seen since she was Tommy's age and had broken my favorite vase. She stood hesitantly in my doorway, shifting nervously, her usual professional confidence replaced by something resembling genuine shame. "Mom, can we please talk honestly?" she asked, her voice carrying none of the legal authority she'd wielded during our brutal courthouse battle. I invited her inside cautiously, noting how she surveyed my living room, with eyes that seemed to see it clearly for the first time in years. The financial records exposed during our legal battle had reminded her where she'd come from, how I'd sacrificed consistently to provide opportunities she'd taken for granted. "I've been thinking constantly about what Judge Foster said," Sarah began hesitantly, settling into the same chair where I'd held her through countless childhood crises and teenage heartbreaks. Her next words would determine whether our mother-daughter relationship could survive the inheritance crisis that had nearly destroyed everything we'd built together over 32 years. The gentle rain provided a soothing soundtrack to what felt like a moment of potential redemption. "I was completely wrong, Mom," Sarah said, words emerging slowly, like they'd been trapped behind her throat for months, fighting to escape the prison of stubborn pride and self-serving justification. Tears gathered in her eyes as she looked around my small apartment, finally seeing the dozens of photographs of Tommy and her covering every surface, silent testimony to a mother's enduring love that had never wavered despite her betrayal. "The inheritance made me absolutely crazy," she continued, voice breaking with genuine emotion as she confronted the monster she'd become during those dark weeks of legal warfare. "I convinced myself I was protecting Tommy's future, but I was really just protecting my own control over everything." She showed me pictures of Tommy's new bedroom, beautifully decorated with superhero themes, funded by his inheritance, but somehow lacking the warmth of our weekend fort-building sessions using couch cushions and imagination. "He talks about you constantly," she admitted, confirming what I'd suspected about his difficult adjustment during the legal proceedings. Her hands shook as she reached into her purse, retrieving an envelope that would complete her confession and perhaps begin our healing process. The apology felt genuine, But trust broken by deliberate betrayal would require much more than words to repair completely. Sarah handed me an envelope containing a cashier's check for $15,000, money representing far more than its face value in our damaged relationships context. "This is for your legal fees and additional funding for Tommy's college account you started," she explained, voice thick with emotion as she watched me examine the check with trembling fingers. The amount would cover Patricia's retainer with enough remaining to boost Tommy's education savings significantly, but the gesture's meaning transcended financial compensation. "I never realized how much you've sacrificed for both of us," Sarah continued, her admission revealing maturity that had been buried under years of financial security and professional success. She described visiting my old grocery store, talking with Jim Morrison about the overtime shifts I'd worked to afford her college textbooks, the promotions I'd declined to attend her school events, the hardships I'd endured to ensure her opportunities. The inheritance crisis had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about our relationship that wealth had previously obscured. Her next revelation would complete her transformation from adversary back to ally, though some betrayals leave permanent scars that never fully fade. The check sat between us like a bridge across the chasm that greed had created. "I've instructed the trust company to establish a grandmother fund in your name," Sarah announced with growing confidence, her words carrying the weight of someone who'd learned expensive lessons about the difference between financial wealth and authentic emotional richness. She explained how she'd worked with professional trustees to establish a separate account covering my expenses when caring for Tommy, ensuring poverty would never again become a weapon against our relationship. $2,500 monthly for activities, emergencies, and anything Tommy needs when he's with you, she detailed, voice gaining strength as she outlined her comprehensive plan for restitution and family healing. The fund represented much more than practical support. It was acknowledgement that love required investment, that grandmotherly devotion deserved recognition rather than legal challenges. "Tommy actually suggested it," she added, with the first genuine smile I'd seen since this nightmare began. Her son had apparently inherited wisdom along with the fortune, understanding intuitively what adults had nearly destroyed through greed and pride. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that a 7-year-old had proposed the solution we'd needed expensive lawyers to negotiate. This breakthrough marked the beginning of our family's genuine healing process. Tommy's 8th birthday party the following month felt like celebrating much more than another year of his life. It marked our family's emergence from the dark valley of inheritance-driven conflict. Sarah decorated their backyard with the same care she'd previously put into destroying our relationship, though this time her energy focused on healing rather than harm. The guest list deliberately included everyone who'd supported me during the custody battle: Patricia Henderson, Mrs. Rodriguez, even Jim Morrison from the grocery store who'd written such a powerful character reference. Tommy moved between adults with natural grace, finally sensing genuine peace returning to his world, his superhero cape fluttering as he ran, sharing his infectious birthday joy. The trust fund statements showed his inheritance growing steadily under professional management, but the real treasure was watching 3 generations learn to love each other again despite the damage greed had inflicted. Sarah made a point of publicly thanking me during the party, her words carrying the weight of hard-learned lessons about family priorities and what truly mattered in life. As Tommy blew out 8 candles with enthusiasm, I realized the unexpected gift had ultimately strengthened rather than destroyed our family bonds. The inheritance had tested us severely, but we'd emerged more united than before. 6 months after the legal victory that saved our family, I stood in Tommy's school auditorium watching him receive an award for academic excellence, surrounded by the family that inheritance money had nearly shattered, but ultimately strengthened through its trials. Sarah sat beside me, our relationship rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect rather than the blind obligation that had characterized our earlier dynamic. The trust fund's quarterly report showed Tommy's inheritance had grown to over $4 million under professional management. But more importantly, he'd developed into a confident child who understood that money was simply a tool rather than a measure of worth. Patricia Henderson waved from across the auditorium, her presence a reminder that some battles are worth fighting regardless of cost or complexity. The grandmother fund had allowed me to take Tommy on educational adventures I'd never dreamed possible. Science museum trips, summer camps, expanding his world while strengthening our precious bond. Judge Foster's wisdom had protected our family from greed while ensuring Tommy's financial future remained secure under professional oversight. As Tommy's name was called and he walked confidently across the stage, I knew the mysterious inheritance had taught us all invaluable lessons about the difference between wealth and true richness. The inheritance had been a test that nearly destroyed us, but ultimately made us stronger. Tommy ran toward us after the ceremony, his achievement certificate clutched proudly in his small hand like a trophy representing much more than scholarly success. "Grandma, did you see me up there?" he called enthusiastically, his voice carrying the confidence of a child who'd weathered family storms and emerged stronger. Sarah lifted him into a celebratory hug, then passed him to me for the traditional grandmother squeeze that had become our customary finale to important events. The inheritance money continued generating returns, creating a foundation that would support Tommy's dreams, whether he wanted to become a teacher, astronaut, or anything else his heart desired. But standing in that auditorium, surrounded by loyal friends who'd supported us during our darkest hour, I realized the most valuable inheritance couldn't be measured in dollars. The mysterious aunt had inadvertently given us something truly priceless through her bequest. The knowledge that real family bonds survive even the most devastating tests. As we walked toward the parking lot together, Tommy holding both our hands with natural affection, I felt genuinely grateful for every painful lesson that had brought us to this moment of hard-earned peace. Our family had been tested by fire and emerged purified, stronger than before. 1 year after the inheritance crisis that nearly tore our family apart, I received a call from Patricia Henderson's office that brought unexpected closure to our legal nightmare. The attorney who'd represented Sarah during our custody battle was facing disbarment proceedings for unethical conduct in multiple cases, including ours. He had no right to obtain your private financial records without proper court authorization, Patricia explained over the phone, her voice carrying satisfaction that justice was finally being served comprehensively. The discovery meant Sarah's legal strategy had been built on illegally obtained evidence, though it wouldn't change our case's outcome since we'd already won through legitimate means. More importantly, Sarah had fired him immediately upon learning about his misconduct and publicly apologized for trusting someone with such questionable ethics. Tommy was thriving in school, his teachers reporting that he'd become a natural leader who helped other children resolve conflicts peacefully rather than through aggression. The inheritance money continued growing under professional management, but Tommy showed more interest in our weekend adventures than his bank statements. Sarah had enrolled in family counseling to address the underlying issues that had made her vulnerable to greed's corruption during our crisis. Our relationship grew stronger each month as trust slowly returned through consistent actions rather than empty promises. 2 years after the inheritance had tested our family's bonds, Tommy celebrated his 9th birthday with a maturity that amazed everyone who knew our story of redemption and healing. He'd grown into a thoughtful child who understood that his unusual financial situation came with responsibilities as well as privileges and opportunities for service to others. "Grandma, I want to donate some of my birthday money to the Children's Hospital," he announced during his party, demonstrating wisdom that surpassed many adults twice his age who'd never learned such generosity. Sarah beamed with pride as her son showed the values we'd taught him through example rather than lectures about character and giving. The trust company had established a charitable giving account, allowing Tommy to make small donations to causes he cared about, teaching him that wealth existed to serve others rather than merely accumulate endlessly in bank accounts. His academic performance continued excelling, but he'd also developed strong friendships with children from various economic backgrounds without displaying any arrogance about his financial advantages or inherited fortune. Mrs. Rodriguez reported that Tommy often shared his lunch with classmates who'd forgotten theirs, showing generosity that came from his heart rather than his substantial bank account. The inheritance had become a tool for teaching important life lessons about responsibility, compassion, and the temporary nature of material possessions that could be lost as quickly as they were gained. Sarah had transformed from someone who'd nearly destroyed our family into a mother who prioritized character development over financial accumulation and control of assets. The third anniversary of our courthouse victory brought reflection on how dramatically our family had changed since the inheritance had entered our lives like a tornado, testing everything we held dear about ourselves and each other. Tommy was now 10 years old, tall for his age, with his grandfather's gentle eyes and his mother's determined chin that suggested strength of character rather than dangerous stubbornness. The trust fund had grown to over $5 million, but he showed more excitement about his science fair project than quarterly investment reports from the professional management company. Sarah had been promoted to partner at her law firm, but she'd negotiated a schedule that prioritized family time over billable hours and financial advancement that had once consumed her entire identity. Our Sunday pancake tradition had evolved into elaborate cooking experiments, where Tommy learned to make everything from crepes to homemade pasta, while we talked about school, friends, and his dreams for the future that extended far beyond his inheritance. The Grandmother Fund had enabled us to travel together, visiting historical sites and museums that sparked his curiosity about the world beyond our immediate community and narrow experiences. Patricia Henderson had become a family friend, joining us for holidays and special occasions as someone who'd witnessed our family's transformation from legal adversaries to loving allies united in common purpose. Judge Foster had retired, but she'd sent Tommy a congratulatory card when he won the state science fair, remembering the case that had touched her heart and restored her faith in family bonds. The inheritance that had nearly destroyed us had become a catalyst for growth, teaching us that money could either divide families or unite them depending on the values that guided its use and distribution among generations. On Tommy's 11th birthday, Sarah made an announcement that brought our inheritance journey full circle in the most beautiful way possible, showing how far we'd traveled from that dark kitchen confrontation years earlier. "I've decided to establish the Davidson Family Foundation," she said, her voice carrying the same determination that had once frightened me, but now filled me with tremendous pride and hope for the future. The foundation would use a portion of Tommy's inheritance to support grandparents raising grandchildren, providing legal assistance, financial support, and educational resources to families facing custody battles similar to the nightmare we'd endured. "We want to help other families avoid what we went through," Sarah explained, her eyes meeting mine with genuine remorse for the pain she'd caused and sincere dedication to preventing similar tragedies from destroying other relationships between generations. Tommy's face lit up with excitement about helping other children maintain relationships with their grandparents, understanding intuitively that his fortune could serve a purpose greater than personal accumulation or selfish pleasure and luxury spending. The trust company had enthusiastically supported the foundation concept, recognizing it as an excellent way to teach Tommy about philanthropy and social responsibility from a young age when such lessons could take root permanently. Patricia Henderson agreed to serve on the foundation's board, bringing her legal expertise to help families navigate custody disputes without destroying relationships in the destructive process of litigation and courtroom warfare. Mrs. Rodriguez volunteered to help identify families in need through her school connections, creating a network of support that would extend our healing beyond our immediate situation to touch countless other lives across the region. The inheritance had completed its transformation from a source of division into a tool for unity and healing that would benefit generations. As I watched Tommy blow out 11 candles surrounded by family and friends who'd supported us through our darkest hours, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought us to this moment of peace and purpose that seemed impossible just years earlier. The inheritance that had nearly destroyed our family had instead taught us invaluable lessons about what truly mattered in life. Relationships built on love rather than obligation, trust earned through actions rather than words, and wealth used to serve others rather than merely accumulate power and influence. Sarah had grown from a daughter who'd betrayed me into a woman I admired for her courage in admitting mistakes and working tirelessly to make amends through meaningful action and genuine service to others in similar situations. Tommy had inherited more than money from Great Aunt Millicent. He'd inherited wisdom about the responsibilities that come with privilege and the importance of using advantages to help others rather than merely benefit himself, selfishly, through luxury and material accumulation. Our family had emerged from the valley of greed stronger, more united, and more purposeful than we'd ever been before the crisis tested our bonds with fire and legal warfare. The Davidson Family Foundation would ensure that the unexpected gift continued generating positive outcomes for families facing similar challenges, transforming a potentially destructive inheritance into a source of healing and hope for countless others facing similar betrayals. As we sang Happy Birthday to Tommy, surrounded by love rather than legal documents and court orders, I knew our story would inspire other families to choose reconciliation over revenge, understanding over anger, and love over money when faced with similar tests of character and family bonds. The inheritance had given us much more than financial security. It had given us wisdom, purpose, and an unshakable foundation built on forgiveness and genuine caring that no amount of money could ever purchase or guarantee for future generations. 5 years had passed since that devastating birthday party when Sarah had first announced Tommy's inheritance, and our family gathered once again to celebrate. But this time, the atmosphere was filled with joy rather than hidden agendas and legal threats that had once poisoned our relationships and nearly destroyed everything we'd built. Tommy, now 12 years old, had grown into a remarkable young man who balanced academic excellence with genuine compassion for others, never letting his substantial wealth define his character or relationships with peers from different backgrounds and economic circumstances. The Davidson Family Foundation had helped over 200 families navigate custody disputes while preserving grandparent relationships, earning recognition from the state legislature for its innovative approach to family law mediation and support services that prioritized healing over litigation and courtroom victories. Sarah had been elected to the Family Court Reform Commission, using her painful experience to help other parents understand that children's emotional needs must always trump financial considerations in custody decisions and family planning that affected multiple generations. Patricia Henderson had published a law review article about our case, establishing new precedents for grandparents' rights that had been cited in dozens of similar cases across multiple states and jurisdictions throughout the country. The trust company reported that Tommy's inheritance had grown to over $7 million, but he remained more interested in his volunteer work at the Children's Hospital than his impressive portfolio performance or quarterly statements from investment managers. Mrs. Rodriguez had been promoted to principal and often invited me to speak to new teachers about the importance of recognizing different family structures and supporting grandparent involvement in education and child development across all economic levels. Our story had become a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds when people choose love over pride and understanding over revenge in their most challenging moments. Judge Foster, though retired, had stayed in touch with our family and often cited our case as an example of how the legal system could facilitate healing rather than simply determine winners and losers in family disputes that affected innocent children. She'd written a letter of recommendation when Tommy applied for early admission to the gifted program at the local high school, praising not his academic achievements, but his character and maturity in handling complex family dynamics with grace and wisdom. The letter mentioned how rarely she'd seen a child maintain such poise under pressure, showing wisdom beyond his years in understanding that forgiveness was stronger than resentment and more powerful than revenge or bitterness. Tommy had framed the letter and hung it in his bedroom, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the lessons he'd learned about justice, mercy, and the importance of treating all people with dignity regardless of their mistakes or past failures that might have hurt others deeply. Sarah had laminated a copy to keep in her purse, reading it whenever she needed reminding that redemption was possible for anyone willing to face their failures honestly and work diligently to make amends through action rather than empty words or promises. The judge's words had become a family mission statement that guided our daily decisions and interactions. True wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away, not in what we control, but in what we release with love and compassion. Her wisdom had guided our foundation's work and our personal relationships, helping us understand that the inheritance was never really about money, but about testing our capacity for growth and forgiveness when faced with our deepest character flaws. The legal victory had been important, but the personal transformation it had catalyzed was invaluable and lasting for generations to come. On Tommy's 13th birthday, he surprised everyone by announcing his decision to donate $1 million of his inheritance to establish scholarship funds at 3 different schools in low-income neighborhoods, ensuring that financial barriers wouldn't prevent other children from accessing quality education and opportunities that could change their lives. "Grandma taught me that money is only valuable when it helps people achieve their dreams," he explained to the newspaper reporter covering the story, his words reflecting wisdom that many adults never develop despite decades of life experience and supposed maturity gained through years of struggle. Sarah beamed with maternal pride as her son articulated values that she'd nearly destroyed in her pursuit of financial control, understanding now that the best inheritance she could give him was a strong moral compass rather than mere wealth accumulation or material possessions that would eventually lose their meaning. The scholarship recipients would be chosen not based on test scores alone, but on demonstrations of character, perseverance, and commitment to helping others in their communities, ensuring that Tommy's generosity would create a ripple effect of positive impact for generations to come throughout the region. Local news stations covered the story extensively, turning Tommy into a role model for other wealthy children who might otherwise grow up believing that privilege entitled them to special treatment rather than special responsibilities and obligations to serve others less fortunate. The trust company created a special ceremony to formalize the scholarship endowment, with Patricia Henderson serving as the legal advisor and Judge Foster delivering the keynote address about the power of young people to change the world through thoughtful philanthropy and service to others who needed help most. Mrs. Rodriguez cried tears of joy as she watched her former student demonstrate that the lessons about kindness and sharing she'd taught in 2nd grade had taken root and flourished into something beautiful and meaningful that would outlast any material possession. The inheritance had completed its transformation from a potential curse into an undeniable blessing that would benefit countless families for decades to come across multiple generations. As Tommy entered high school, his maturity continued impressing teachers and classmates who had no idea about his financial circumstances, because he'd learned to let his character speak louder than his bank account or family wealth that could have easily corrupted someone with less guidance. He'd grown tall and lean like his grandfather, with kind eyes that reflected the wisdom gained from watching his family navigate crisis, and emerged stronger through forgiveness and hard work rather than bitterness or resentment that could have poisoned their relationships permanently. The Davidson Family Foundation had expanded beyond legal assistance to include educational programs teaching families about healthy communication, conflict resolution, and the importance of maintaining relationships across generations despite disagreements or difficulties that might arise from different perspectives and life experiences. Sarah had taken a sabbatical from her law practice to write a book about our experience, tentatively titled "When Love Conquers Greed: A Family's Journey Through Inheritance and Redemption," hoping to help other families avoid the mistakes that had nearly destroyed ours permanently through pride and financial obsession. The manuscript included interviews with Patricia Henderson, Judge Foster, Mrs. Rodriguez, and even Tommy himself, creating a comprehensive examination of how money can either divide or unite families depending on the values that guide its use and distribution among family members across generations. Publishers were already expressing interest in the project, recognizing that our story offered hope to families struggling with similar challenges involving inheritance, custody, and the complex dynamics of modern family relationships in an increasingly materialistic society that often prioritized wealth over love. Tommy had insisted that all proceeds from the book go directly to the foundation, demonstrating once again that his greatest inheritance wasn't monetary, but moral and spiritual in nature, reflecting the values we'd worked so hard to instill. The young man who'd once been caught in the middle of our legal battle had become the family's moral center, guiding us toward choices that honored love over greed and service over selfishness in every decision we made together. During Tommy's 14th birthday celebration, I found myself reflecting on how profoundly our family had changed since that terrible day when Sarah had first announced the inheritance that seemed destined to tear us apart forever with its corrupting influence on our values and relationships. The boy blowing out candles before me had grown into a young man of exceptional character, someone who understood that true wealth lay in relationships, service, and the positive impact one could make on the world, rather than the numbers in bank accounts or investment portfolios that could disappear overnight. Sarah had evolved from someone I barely recognized during our legal battle into a daughter I was incredibly proud of, someone who'd faced her worst impulses honestly and worked tirelessly to become a better mother, daughter, and human being through genuine effort and commitment to change. The inheritance money continued growing under professional management, but it had become a tool for good rather than a source of division, funding scholarships, supporting families in crisis, and teaching valuable lessons about responsibility and generosity to future generations who would carry these values forward. Patricia Henderson often visited for family dinners, having become more than our attorney but a cherished friend who'd witnessed our transformation from courtroom adversaries to loving allies united in common purpose and shared values that transcended financial considerations. The Grandmother Fund had allowed me to create countless magical memories with Tommy, from educational trips to simple afternoon adventures, proving that the best gifts weren't expensive but thoughtful, not purchased but experienced, together with love and attention that money couldn't buy. Mrs. Rodriguez continued teaching with renewed passion, often sharing our story with parents who worried that family conflicts might damage their children permanently, offering hope that healing was always possible with patience and commitment to change. Our journey from inheritance crisis to family foundation had become a testament to the power of forgiveness, the possibility of redemption, and the truth that love ultimately triumphs over greed when people choose wisdom over selfishness in their most challenging moments. On Tommy's 15th birthday, as I watched him laugh with friends who valued him for his kindness rather than his fortune, I realized that the unexpected inheritance had given our family something far more precious than financial security or material wealth that could be lost as quickly as it was gained. We'd gained wisdom about what truly mattered, strength forged through adversity, and unbreakable bonds built on forgiveness rather than obligation or fear of loss that had once threatened to destroy everything we held dear. The scared woman who'd faced legal papers in Sarah's kitchen had become a confident grandmother secure in her relationship with her grandson, knowing that their love was protected not by court orders, but by years of shared experiences and mutual devotion that couldn't be legislated away by any judge or attorney. Sarah had transformed from someone who'd weaponized the legal system against her own mother into a woman dedicated to helping other families avoid similar destruction, using her painful experience to prevent comparable tragedies from occurring in other households facing similar challenges. Tommy had inherited the best qualities from both sides of his family: determination and intelligence from his mother, compassion and wisdom from years of watching adults learn to forgive and grow together despite serious mistakes and betrayals that had tested every relationship to its breaking point. The Davidson Family Foundation continued expanding its reach, helping families across multiple states navigate inheritance disputes, custody battles, and intergenerational conflicts with mediation rather than litigation as the preferred resolution method that preserved relationships. Patricia Henderson had joined our foundation's board of directors, bringing her legal expertise to develop new approaches to family law that prioritized healing over winning, understanding over punishment, and restoration over destruction of family bonds. As I hugged Tommy on his 15th birthday, surrounded by family and friends who'd supported us through our darkest hours, I knew that the inheritance had taught us the most valuable lesson of all, that love, patience, and forgiveness can transform even the most devastating betrayals into opportunities for growth, healing, and service to others who face similar challenges in their own families and relationships. Now, 8 years after that devastating birthday party revelation, I understand that the mysterious gift was never really about the money at all, but about testing our family's capacity for forgiveness, growth, and transformation through adversity that could have destroyed us permanently. Tommy, now 15 and preparing for high school with plans to study social work and family counseling, had grown into exactly the kind of young man his great-aunt would have been proud to call family: generous, wise, compassionate, and completely unimpressed by material wealth despite having more of it than most people see in a lifetime. The inheritance that once threatened to destroy our family had become the cornerstone of a movement that strengthened countless others, proving that love truly could triumph over greed when people chose forgiveness over revenge and understanding over anger in their darkest moments. Our story had inspired hundreds of families to choose healing over legal warfare, to prioritize relationships over financial gain, and to remember that the greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't money, but the wisdom to use whatever they have in service of others who need help most. As I watch Tommy continue growing into the man he's becoming, I know that Great-Aunt Millicent's unexpected legacy will live on, not in bank accounts or investment portfolios, but in the love, compassion, and generosity he'll carry forward to touch countless lives throughout his journey. If you've ever faced family conflicts over money or inheritance, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest treasures we discover aren't the ones we inherit, but the ones we choose to create together through forgiveness, understanding, and love that transcends any material wealth the world can offer.